Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwyn. I am Oliver Gwyn, and this is where I give you my off the cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing data and philosophy. This week I'm talking about the step ladder of growth. So I was doing our yearly metrics on all side growth as an agency, and opportunities were down, all of the top of funnel things were down, reach was down in general, and this was expected and planned and on purpose and good because pitches were up and wins were up. And that is a normal thing that can often happen as you begin to narrow your focus in growth. But it's a concept that I think a lot of our team and the data people aren't really familiar with. In step laddering your way up to growth, in that growth is never a linear line, but it will go up like that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what that is and why that happens and all of that kind of thing. So let's start off with the obvious thing. You can't target all the people all the time because you're not Cola Cola, and even Cola Cola can't do that anymore. You don't have an unlimited budget. Being anything mass audience costs a lot of money to get in front of people. And that's why everybody always says that it's important that you find your niche, you find your core audience, and then you build. Um, but what I see is actually a little bit more of a cycle on step laddering. So the first thing is that you normally you go a little bit broader, or you go to a new channel, or if you're in the B2B, you try a new vertical. So you're casting a slightly wider net, broader messaging, looser targeting to explore possible market fits. And the goal is really just to find early signals of engagement, and you want to measure retention, engagement, customer economics, customer lifetime value across the cohorts that come in. Um, and whenever you expand, you want to do this in a silo. So you want to make sure that even if it is broad, that it's separated out from your other normal activity. You want to make sure that you are creating a campaign, for example, in a new territory, that you have landing pages for that territory, you have ads specifically for that territory, because it's really difficult later on if you decide that you're going to run ads for all the countries in the world to then pick which countries are the best. So start with the most simplest thing, which is you want to build something in a silo for this new venture or channel or whatever it might be. And you want to detect those signals, so retention, engagement, money. And the goal is to separate sort of tourists, low value, high churn people from the core people, the sticky, the high LTV people. And once you've found those people and you can then refine your messages, you can allocate the right resources to figuring out how much it costs to acquire those people. You can potentially change your product, which is the thing that in growth that people don't often talk about, that sometimes you need to change your product to attract those right people. Your then goal is to actually to shrink that down deliberately to improve profitability and scalability. And that's like a ladder climb, in that every rung is a new audience and a new test. Some break, some hold. You normally want to start small, prove the worth, prove the money, and then expand from there. And it sounds simple and obvious when I talk about it, but that doesn't happen so often in business from what I've seen. People don't seem to understand this concept that you go a little broader, and then naturally your job is to narrow that down as quickly as possible to find the right people to see the differentiators in the data. And that's where market research can really come in handy, hearing in first person from the new people that you've acquired and what brought them in. It's where having your data ducks in a row is really important. And I have a few real world case studies on this. So Airbnb in its early days marketed to anyone traveling, on Craigslist scraping, PR stunts, general rent-a-room messaging. And data showed strong retention and referral loops among budget-conscious millennial travelers, and later in city break tourists. And so the contraction then was that Airbnb narrowed its targeting around those groups, building trust features, for example, reviews, insurance, host guarantees, and stopped wasting energy on non engaged segments like corporate travelers until much later. And I guess the lesson there is that expansion was crucial to discover which traveler personas yielded long-term value. Contra- Contraction of the made the business sustainable, and it meant that later they could do a new offering for business people. So it's not to say necessarily when we segment and we niche that we're then going to ignore the other segments forever and a day. It's really that we want to refine that so it works and it's just sustainable, and you know how much money you have to spend and all that kind of thing. HubSpot, which is a CRM sort of tool, they had a free tool which was a website grader, and it brought in millions and millions of signups, many of them completely irrelevant to HubSpot. And so they modeled churn and deal size, and they discovered certain firmographics, SMBs with dedicated marketing teams with high LTV. And so the messaging today, if you look on HubSpot, is aimed towards go-to-market teams. And their contraction was that they built this lead scoring system to focus sales and nurture only those fitting their ICP, consciously shrinking their active pursuit base. Without a wide top of funnel, they wouldn't have identified the ICP to begin with. Without contraction, their CAC would have spiraled. And the contraction is really important. It protects CAC, cost of acquisition, stops you burning those acquisition dollars on low LTV users. It improves retention because you're focusing on segments that will naturally engage and pay sustainable over the long term. So that lifetime value play that I'm always talking about. You can refine your product roadmap, knowing your highest value audience lets you prioritize features that deepen their value that they're getting out of your brand. And you'll see a much healthier growth curve because instead of growth at all costs, what you get is growth that compounds, fewer users, but each of them worth more. But in the short term, what you get is dips, like I'm seeing this year at the top of my funnel, like I'm seeing in opportunities, but it's expected from my sort of experience in marketing. And so sometimes it's important that you look at your customer journey and you think about how to narrow down the segment to put in barriers in place so you can attract more of the right people. An example of this, so we put pricing on our website this year. We put more of the process on there than we ever had before. It was quite vague before. And that's something that we've really consciously done over the last 2 years. And it's meant that we've got less opportunities, but also less people who inquire and we talk to them and then they can't afford our services basically. And so, yeah, we're getting less opportunities, but the opportunities we get, we're getting more pitches from them and more of them are converting because we're better aligned. And so, while it's always important to think about your marketing and how you go to market, it's also important to think of the next steps along those lines. So how can you more easily, like HubSpot did, find the high value people and then contract on there? And again, it's not to say that because something didn't work once, if you tried it in a small way, that you can't then try it again. Certainly in the B2B world, you could do a very small campaign around, automotive or whatever it is, and it doesn't work one year, and maybe you want to come back to it and visit it because once you've got the bare minimum that you need in terms of content, why not try it again another year, try a different approach? As long as the cost is low and the barriers to entry are quite low, then there's no harm in doing these things and coming back to them, because I think if you naturally have an inclination that there's money there, then it will be proven. What I do find that people do that is a bit dangerous on this side is that everybody wants these high value customers, but first see how much of your current customer base they represent. So I've seen a lot of companies where they want obviously they want the rich people, but we can't all target the rich people because they're very expensive from a CAC point of view. And when I looked at the numbers, the rich segment that they wanted to change the whole branding, everything towards was like 6% of their business. And I was saying it doesn't represent who you are today. You can go that way, but this is going to be a lot longer than just changing your branding and changing your messaging. And you have to be careful because moving so far from one to another can disrupt your business model completely, and it can turn off the customers that you've already got. A bit like Jaguar with the massive rebrand that we saw this year turned off their existing customer. And so you have to be really careful and slow and deliberate in these things, and not make massive knee-jerk changes in the hope of just attracting a better audience. And so step laddering to growth is the process of expansion with the specific aim that you then contract your audience over time. You find the core people that are definitely interested. And that means a lot of management in terms of your CRM, in terms of your processes, in terms of lead scoring, in terms of understanding how you're going to evaluate, okay, let's stop sending messages to these 500 people because it's time and it's money, even if you're automating it. Let's send messages, send money, I guess, if that's your business, but let's send messages to 50 people who are worth it. And the process of doing that is very dangerous when you automate all of that process. It should be a case where so much of it is automated, normally at the top levels. And when those people are verified and you know that they're interested, then you want to take more and more of a manual approach. And of course, when you find the really high value people, that should be 100% manual if you can afford to do that. So that's been why sometimes contraction is a good thing in marketing as you grow, as long as you are then aiming towards finding your core audience and aiming towards high LTV users. Thanks very much for watching. If you've got any questions or comments, please put them below. This has been another episode of Gin with Gwyn.